Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emilio Gonzalez.
Buenas tardes. My name is Emilio Gonzalez. I'm an immigrant. And for the last 26, 27 years, I've been coming before audiences like you. But today is likely one of the last times I do so. So I'm going to pursue other chapters in my life. So rather than read from prepared remarks, I'd like to just speak to you from the heart. We're going to hear from a distinguished panel of educators about the future of education. And I'd like to share three thoughts with you that in, 30 some years in government and private sector have remained constant. One is, all this technology we're talking about, these are moving targets. In fact, I would say that the target is accelerating its pace of change, and therefore challenging the very institutions of government and of society to keep up with it and to develop reasonable policies to protect us from it. At the same time, the world of learning is changing. When I went to school, computers were barely on the horizon. I couldn't have this in the classroom to ask Wikipedia what the answer was. I had to learn in a different way. And, to this day, I remember the words of a great icon at my school. And what he wrote, I think, he wrote it in the context of the Cold War, but yet it's relevant today, which is humankind operates with primordial instincts, is reliant on medieval institutions, and all while we build godlike technologies. And that's the challenge before all of you, particularly the scholars and the young people here, which is how we're going to navigate this fast-changing world. My three observations: one, I've told you. The second one is kind of a personal one, but it applies to learning. My entire life I've dealt with dyslexia, and which is why I always think backwards. But we have to have models for teaching and learning that are scalable, that are flexible, that are nimble, and that accommodate for different ways we learn as people. And I would say Latinos in particular require that flexibility because of language, culture, and other matters. I want to thank Aspen for creating a home for what has been long overdue, which is a Latino think tank that has focus, that has vision, that has a wonderful leader in Dominica Lynch, and that is beholden to no one. We need this think tank more than ever. Our community needs to unite more than ever because some difficult days are ahead. I'm very proud of the work we did at Verizon. In fact, I was telling the ambassador in 2013, we gathered in a room to determine if we were going to publicly support comprehensive immigration reform. And it's one of the few times in my career of 20 plus years there that I've been in a room where we actually yelled at each other. But I can yell too. And we came out with our CEO publicly and supported this. It took a lot of risk, and to this day, the Latino community and its advocates, this is 11 years ago, still thank us for that, for having a corporate voice at the table. Fast forward, we defend DACA in the courts, in the Supreme Court, and in the circuit courts. We don't just do this because it's the right thing to do. We do this because it's good economics, because we understand our marketplace. And I think that's why it's so wonderful that we can convene and gather here and think about the economic mobility, the economic power that you have. And I would say to you, as things get a little difficult moving forward, put your differences aside if you can. Unite as a people. A lot of people who don't have a voice depend on you. And speak up and also speak with your wallets. It's what we listen to. I do have one suggestion for Aspen before I conclude. I think it'd be wonderful if we rotate the name of this so that next year it is Latinas in Society. I thank you for your time, your attention, and I do look forward to the panel. Thank you again.
Thank you, Emilio, and we certainly wish you well in future endeavors. And now, and I just want to preface by saying that we're going to be in for some great panels. We have great panels this morning, and that momentum will continue throughout the afternoon to the end. So if you had plans to depart a little early, dispense with those plans. Call whoever you were going to see at 3 or 4 o'clock. Say, sorry, I can't make it. I've got an important obligation. I cannot leave. And it begins with this panel that I'm going to introduce, or the moderator, I should say, because now joining us to lead and moderate our next panel, Classroom to Boardroom, the Power of Education for Economic Advancement, is Dan Porterfield. Now, you know you have arrived as a leader and as an organization when Dominica can convince not just anybody, but the CEO and president of the Aspen Institute. Un aplauso, por favor. Si me permiten, el jefe está en la casa y le damos la bienvenida. Dan is a distinguished leader in education and public service, committed to fostering inclusive dialogue and developing innovative solutions to our most pressing challenges. As a proud Rhodes Scholar, he earned his master's degree in philosophy from the University of Oxford, reflecting his dedication to intellectual excellence and civic engagement. Prior to his current duties as leader of the Aspen Institute, he served as president of Franklin and Marshall College, where he focused on enhancing student success and promoting diversity. His leadership and vision are instrumental in driving the mission of the Aspen Institute and advancing economic mobility. And I publicly want to thank Dan during my tenure as chairman of the advisory board for the access, the conversations, and the support that he rendered. Please give a warm welcome to the CEO and president of the Aspen Institute, Dan Porterfield.
Thank you, Gotti, and welcome everybody to post-lunch. I'm so excited that we have with us today Chancellor Mildred Millie Garcia and the great entrepreneur and mentor, Angel Morales. Could I ask the two of you to come on up? So I will kick us off in a discussion about the linkages of education to economic inclusion and equity and prosperity. And we have two leaders here who are both examples that prove the possible and leaders that are making that possibility happen now at scale for others. Before starting, a quick thank you to Gotti for his leadership, to Francisco for his leadership, to the singular sensation, Dominica Lynch, for her leadership, and the whole team in our Latinos in Society program, and also to Emilio from Verizon for those really thoughtful remarks from the heart. And I myself will take some of those ideas really back home with me to reflect further. So At Your Place is a book that it sort of like tried to type, but actually it was like tears and blood came out of me as I was trying to write during COVID. The book is called Mindset Matters, The Power of College to Activate Lifelong Growth. Again, the two of you, I think, are exhibits A and B, perhaps, in real life. But I mention it both with gratitude to Dominica for thinking it might be worthy of your time. If you go through, there's lots of stories about the students at Franklin and Marshall who we recruited under what we called our talent strategy, through which we tripled financial aid. We ended something called merit aid and put all of the money into what's called need-based aid. And then we met every student's full demonstrated need. And that tripling of aid led to everything else tripling. Students from rural communities, students who identify as Latino, students who are African American, students who identify as white rural students, immigrant students, everything tripled. And the school became an even better school for all students because of that. And we did some things to make sure we were recruiting, of course, students that would thrive in that setting, which was, high academic intensity, lots of research opportunities, a chance to get out on the field or on the stage and do your thing. We wanted super active, involved, and engaged students. And we actually developed a theory of talent that where we put aside, if you will, things like standardized tests. We did care about having a rigorous high school curriculum. I thought that was predictive of success. But we also looked at other factors that we called talent. And those included, A, having a vision for why you are in college, for being willing to sacrifice for that vision. B, having the curiosity, the open-mindedness to try something different, try something new. By the way, all those immigrant students, they all got it from their parents, the openness to something new. Third, the experience of raising your hand for opportunity, even when there maybe isn't as much opportunity in your life as in other people's lives, but there's something there and you grab for it. A little like the entrepreneurs that you support. They see something, they grab, they go, they raise their hand. Yes, I want opportunity. And then the fourth quality of talent was resilience. People that have lived through challenges, kept their minds open and positive, pushed forward, grown from setbacks. In some cases, even been thankful for those setbacks because those setbacks actually gave them the understanding of their own superpower. And so those qualities of talent, it turns out, are overrepresented in low and moderate income communities, maybe relative even to upper income communities, overrepresented among immigrant communities in comparison to native-born populations, overrepresented in rural and central city communities because they're about striving. And there's so many strivers in our society. And those strivers are always overrepresented among newcomers in the United States, always. So I offer that thought just so you have a sense both of why is this book at my place. If you go through every chapter, you'll see students like Eddie Alsina from Miami, or like Cameron Miller from New York City, or like Carolina Giraldo, or like Brandon Stevens, who was actually was undocumented, but became a mentor of the DACA students. And I hope you'll see some of the inspirational stories in that book that you yourselves have been promoting in your communities. Which brings me to the two of you, because the two of you show in the financial sector, education sector, how and why it matters so much to invest in young people and to use education as a lever to promote equity of opportunity and the flourishing of individual people. So perhaps I could ask you both to introduce yourself to this audience, speaking a little bit personally about your own journey of educational growth, your own belief in the power of education to make a difference in your lives and more broadly, the lives of all in society. And could I start first with you,
Sure.
Dr. Garcia?
First of all, I'm really delighted to be here. I came in last year and I've learned so much from all of you that I bring back to the work that I do. So thank you. For the question, I am a first-generation college student, born in Brooklyn, New York, of Puerto Rican parents. Seven brothers and sisters. 5 were born in Puerto Rico. The 2 youngest, me and my brother, were born in Brooklyn. They worked in the factories, if you know New York City, in Dumbo, which was real factories where my parents worked. But they had a dream, And their dream was, la única herencia que una familia pobre le deja a sus hijos es una buena educación. The only inheritance a poor family could leave its children is a good education. Unfortunately, my father died when I was 12. And we had to move to the housing projects, Farragut Fort Greene projects. Hello, everybody, from the housing to the housing projects. And yet my mother kept pushing the idea of education to the point that when I went to college, as the first one in my family to go to college, I want to date myself. She put the food on the radiator for me to come home because I had to work 2 part-time jobs in order to be able to go to college. And that was the power of what I do today. Why I do what I do, why I've dedicated my life to higher education, because I want every young individual who has a desire to reach higher to be able to reach higher, regardless of how hard it is to get to where you want to go. So that's a real quick story of where I'm from.
Beautiful, thank you.
Come on.
Come on, Angel.
First of all, if anyone's wondering why this turkey is on with 2 real educators, I'm wondering the same thing. So also from a little town in Puerto Rico called the South Bronx. It's north of, my dad was born in Puerto Rico, my mom was born in Ecuador, I was born in the Bronx. I went to public school from kindergarten through 8th grade in the Bronx. Poorest congressional district back when I was growing up. Unfortunately, many, many years ago, still poorest congressional district. Not surprisingly, school's not very good, but when I was in middle school, I was identified by a program, a nonprofit program that placed low-income Black and Latino kids at fancy prep schools. And so I was a financial aid kid that went to one of the fancy prep schools here in New York. And as some of my HSF mentees reminded me, I told this story at a finance conference at HSF 6 or 7 years ago. It used to take me an hour and a half to travel to fancy prep school. It actually was only about 12 or 15-minute drive, but my family didn't own a car. There were no roads that went from shitty part of the Bronx to nice part of the Bronx. And even though I didn't really have it kind of front of mind then, over the years, it became pretty obvious to me that I was being given a very rare opportunity to go to a fancy prep school for high school, and then I went to a fancy college and a fancy business school and got fancy internships, and it was because I was afforded an educational opportunity by some philanthropic sort of nonprofit education leaders who said, hey, there are kids in some areas where these fancy schools don't look that would add to our school, who can do the work, who can succeed, and would make our school better. And that path is what led to my success personally. And you know, when I sit in these conferences and talk to people who attend them or speak up here, a lot of our stories are similar, right? We're all pretty well-educated people who are able to do the things that we can do for our families and hopefully for our communities because of education. So when I was fortunate enough to have the time and the energy and a little bit of the money to sort of decide what the next stage of my career in life would be, it was sort of natural to say, okay, well, how can I do some of the things that people did for me?
Let me follow up with Angel, then I'll come back to you, Millie. But so you've done a lot to support educational opportunity, among many things, supporting the Posse Foundation's incredible work. Chapter 3 of this book is about the power of team, and it includes a whole profile of Miami Posse at Franklin and Marshall. Extraordinary students. Comp Sci High, Transcend Education. You're a big supporter of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund. We may have a couple of fellows who are here today. And thank you to the fund, and we'll see you out in Aspen again this summer, so thank you so much for doing that with us. So today, there is sometimes you hear cynicism about the power of education to provide, if you will, as Gotti said earlier, transformational change in the lives of individuals and in the society. It's one of the many critiques out there that are a little more negative. Do you still believe in the power of college opportunity and of challenging young people to go a little farther, a little harder, even if they feel perhaps outnumbered, unwelcome, not included at some of these so-called fancy schools?
Yes, is the short answer. The slightly longer answer is that I think some of that cynicism comes from a place of knowing that there is no silver bullet, including education. Frankly, even at schools like Harvard, like I went to, I have friends for whom Harvard wasn't transformational. So shit, if Harvard is not going to transform your life, like, yeah, there are going to be lots of educational experiences that don't have 100% transformational impact in the ways that we would want. Having said that, I don't know of very many things in our society that can have that transformational impact. And by the way, I think when you actually afford a child a real education, which is not to say just learn chemistry and physics and what have you, but also like educate the young person to think for themselves, to understand our society and the world around them, those other obstacles that exist that unfortunately get in the way of people who even get an educational opportunity not being able to transform their lives, those are going to be the people who change those other things. Because yes, education sits inside of a context of politics and other special interests and all kinds of things. Well, those old folks will be replaced by new folks at some point, and hopefully those new folks will have a better education, not just in the sense of they got all A's in school, but in that they actually learn how things work, and will have the moral compass to change those things so that education and other things can transform more lives than they do today.
Thank you. We'll come back to that and how that plays out in the financial sector. Let me ask Millie, you are the chancellor of an institution which has 460,000 students, I think.
Almost 500,000.
Almost 500,000 now. How extraordinary. You believe, and yet you're also driving change. So what is the kind of change that you would like to see in our major institutions of higher education?
Let me begin by putting it into context.
Yeah.
49% of our almost 500,000 students are Latinos. Right? 16% Asian Americans, and we're talking about the Vietnamese, the Samoans, the Tongans. That's who we're talking about. 5% African Americans, 20% Caucasian. So I'm putting this into context. Almost 50% of our students receive the federal grant Pell, and almost 80% receive some form of financial aid. Let me also put into context that I love the elite schools. They have 5% of all the students in this country. Where do our students go? They start at the community college the way I did and transfer to the four-year institution. And that's where the energy should be put in. Let me begin there. Then we talk about the change that must happen. And the change that must happen is understanding our communities. We heard that this morning. Understanding their dreams, their hopes, their desires. What language did they have? What high school did they go to? What is their family saying about going to college? We all know Latino families care deeply about what our students do when they go to work and they go to college and how they want to help. And so for us, it's about understanding those students and know that many of our students, all our low-income students come because they want a career. They want out of poverty. It is our job to teach them the critical thinking skills, how to collaborate, how to work with others, how to get mentors, how to get the social capital we heard about this morning that you need, and putting them in those environments where they can have that social capital, like this room. We need individuals like what Angel is doing. We should be applauding him every day because we need people like him to be able to help these students to have that social capital, because we all know that that's also important. So that's how it has to change. Learn by doing, and also opening them up to the new realities, the AI jobs, the green jobs, the energy jobs, not only the ones that our parents knew, right? Or no, the lawyer, the nurse, the doctor, so you don't work in factories or work in the fields, or agribusiness. That's what we need to do in higher education, and then help them along the way to get to where they want to go.
So there's so much concern about the cost of education, including, of course, in our public institutions. It's not just the private ones with this enormous price tags, and usually financial aid programs that offset that, but in the public institutions too. And there's so much focus today also on what does it take to really provide an empowering education? Like specifically, what has to happen? And You've driven a lot of change. This is a gigantic system that you lead. How do you think about that? Well, I'll call it the value proposition. Yes. On the one hand, addressing the cost, and on the other hand, making sure that students really feel equipped and empowered as a result of that education.
First of all, we have to stop painting all of higher ed with the same paintbrush. Our tuition is about $6,700. 66% of our students graduate with no debt. So let's start there. So the stories about all this debt that they're leaving with is not accurate for all our institutions. Secondly, we are looking at cost of attendance. California is the third largest state for cost of living. So we are putting together the cost of tuition that includes books, getting there, having a place to live, all of that, and packaging all the scholarships, packaging all the federal aid, packaging all the state aid, and all that the institution does in order to give the students a picture of what they are receiving. Second of all, paid internships in the area in which they're interested in. They need these paid internships, not only to get the dollars, but to understand, is this the kind of career I really want to go to? Is this what I want to do with the rest of, well, you change your life a lot, but for now, for that career that you take at that moment, that too we have to do. And then it's our responsibility at our universities is to stop saying, terminamos, we graduated them. No, it is our responsibility to help them enter wherever they want to go. May they be entrepreneurs, which is so important, or careers, or go to graduate school, not just for the most favorite that we do at institutions of higher ed, but for every student that graduates. We should be helping them along the way to get into these paid internships, a career, or go on to graduate school, or help them open their own business. One quick story. Our CEOs at Cal State Fullerton, when I was president there, would have our business students present the business case in front of them. And they would then tell them, here's where it's good, here's where it's bad, here's how I'm going to help you. We need more of that in the partnerships that we must have.
Ooh, thank you. So Angel, let me ask you now about the perspective in the financial sector and maybe two angles on it. So we know that we will see a tremendous growth demographically in graduation of Latino AA holders, BA holders, it'll keep going, MA holders, law degrees, PhDs, everything is moving in that direction. And so one question I have is, how will that demographic change play out in a financial sector that to many looks very white and very gray? And then secondly, the group to be invested in, the entrepreneurial class, is also rapidly changing. In fact, we know that Latinos are the leading driver of small business growth in the country. So it's both inside the financial sector and then in the world of investment-worthy companies. Where do you see change coming? Can we quicken the pace of change? Is there anything to watch out for or worry about?
Well, I'll start with the last one, which is I think in my career, which now spans almost 30 years, there has been change. It has just been slow, and there's been, starts and stops. And so, what I think we need to look out for is kind of exactly what happened over the last maybe 4 or 5 years. And earlier panel talked about DEI and the pushback. I sort of remember when there was a pushback against the words affirmative action and when there were different kinds of words. And I think that change will continue in part because of folks in this room, gatherings like this, leaders who speak clearly and directly and transparently about what needs to happen. While I think it's important to make the business case to folks outside of our community for why, whatever you want to call it, diversity, inclusion, having Latinos at the table, hey, we're 20% of the consumer base, we're 25% of young people, more of us are going to college, there are all these talented kids. Yes, that in theory should accelerate this change. In my experience, particularly in the finance industry, but I've seen this in other sectors, it's not necessarily, these are smart folks. It's not necessarily ignorance. It's not like they haven't read the data or the research or what have you. There's a desire not to have that change either happen at all or at a pace that we would like it. So I think we've got to do our own stuff, right? Like I think we've got to build our own schools and build our own firms and invest in our own entrepreneurs and keep making the argument to folks. But, you know, I've grown frustrated with the analogy of like, you know, we want our seat at the table or even we want a longer table. Let's build our own fucking tables.
Right. So, that might be a T-shirt slogan. I feel it coming.
Write that down.
Say a word about your firm's investments, and are there things you've done that that you're really proud of on this theme?
I mean, I've tried to do in my small way the stuff that I hear all of us talk about at conferences, right? Like because I believe it, right? Like I do believe in the business case. I also just like working with Latinos and supporting the community, but I really do believe that Latino and honestly Latina even more so than Latino, I have found with no specific goal of funding more Latinas than Latinos, I've just found that I don't know, they're more entrepreneurial or they have even less access to capital than Latinos. And so I sort of split what I do between kind of the for-profit family office stuff, which is investing in Latino and Latina entrepreneurs and money managers, and on the foundation stuff, supporting and partnering with nonprofit organizations like Aspen, like HSF, to create either educational opportunities or in some case like the work that Aspen was doing in several Latino cities, including Miami, supporting small business, because those entrepreneurs that get educated, they need access to capital, need mentorship, need resources. And so I've tried to use my experiences, both educational and professional, to sort of support the community that I care about. Again, one, because I care about it, but also because those are good investments I'm making that are returning better than, you know, the kinds of returns when I was investing in non-Latinos. So I do it in part selfishly because I really do believe that what we say at these conferences is true. Like our community is as entrepreneurial and produces better returns, financial and otherwise, than as good as any other community.
In theory, an underinvested in population is where there's great opportunity if you're an investor.
Absolutely. Jose Feliciano said earlier in a similar context, like as an investor, I like to go where my capital is underappreciated, where there's less competition for my capital. I get better deals, I get better returns. Unfortunately, like I hope people will put me out of business. I hope there will be so much capital chasing Latino entrepreneurs and Latino money managers that at some point they won't return my call.
So California State University is also investing in students and of course the local economies within which they participate. One thing you're probably thinking about is that we don't know how the issues of immigration will play out in the year ahead, but we do know that it will affect the lives of students and their families significantly. And is there a way that you and the presidents of the institutions are thinking about student needs right now? I realize it's unfolding here.
Yeah, this is a very difficult situation for us because at this point that we know we have about 8,000 undocumented students in our institutions, and we have about 500 faculty and staff who are DACA students, as well as one of our board members is undocumented. So there we are. So we're really thinking outside of the box and helping our students, right? So if, God forbid, this happens, how do we prepare hybrid programs that they could do from computers? And we gave students computers during COVID so that they could do their work to be able to get their degrees. It's also about the caring and listening and the fear. I can't begin to tell you the fear that's among our students at this point, because they don't know. And it may not be even about them. They're in mixed families. And so they're also thinking about their families as well. So we're doing the mental health. We do have legal services in California open to our students. And that's what keep on telling them about that. We're giving them a list of what's your rights. How do you go about the rights? And then, of course, thinking about what's going to happen here. But I want to go back to something. When we talked about those underserved companies that are giving to those underserved companies, there are underserved institutions. 22 of my 23 campuses are Hispanic serving institutions. The amount that you give to Harvard for one student would cover about 10 students at the CSU. hold us accountable in graduating them and getting them into where they want to be. But we always, and I'm sorry to say it, I'm gonna be real honest and real blunt. It's going to all the elite institutions when it's a small number of Latinos there. If you really want to hit Latino students, it's at the CSU and at state colleges and universities.
So that is a fantastic call to action. Angel, bad news, you have to follow that. In our last minute here, do you have a call to action to this, this important audience?
Thankfully, they're writing on that big PowerPoint slide up there, 1 minute, wrap up. Well, one, I don't disagree one iota with what the doctor just said. As someone who went to Harvard and Harvard Business School and worked on Wall Street, like, I can read, I know where Latinos are, right? Like, and so yes, like, I don't have any problem with supporting a little bit of a top-down kind of thing around boards and money managers and the kind of things that people who go to schools like the one that I did do. But the reality is that 99% of Latinos, so we have to support the Latino community at large, not just the things that we care about directly. I believe she's absolutely right about that.
Well, thank you. This was exactly the kind of panel we wanted to have when we dreamed up who would be the two ideal speakers to bring to the stage today. Thank you both,
Thank you.
Angel Milley, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.